For more than 26 years, Sister Luisa Derouen has quietly accompanied transgender Catholics through questions of faith, identity, survival, and belonging. In this conversation, we talk about conscience, accompaniment, Catholicism, and what it means to tell people they are loved by God exactly as they are. You're listening to Whiplash, a listener-supported podcast exploring Catholicism through the lens of queer liberation theology. I'm Max Kuzma, a transgender man and columnist for the National Catholic Reporter and a board member of Dignity USA. Thank you to the paid Substack subscribers who make this work possible. Today's episode is a conversation with Sister Luisa Derouen, whose ministry with trans people stretches back for more than 2 decades. Long before most people in the church were even willing to speak publicly about trans identity, Luisa was accompanying trans Catholics through questions of faith, survival, transition, conscience, and belonging. Before we begin, I want to note that there are already some truly beautiful profiles written about Luisa. There's a nice long-form essay on outreach called No Body Now But Yours, and a profile by my friend Leah Raidt, published by Queer Kentucky, titled Trans Ally Catholic Nun, Sister Luisa Derouen's 26-year mission of quiet resistance. They're worth reading because Luisa's work spans decades, and one podcast episode truly can't capture the scope of what she's done. Since 1999, she's accompanied transgender Catholics through some of the most difficult spiritual questions imaginable. Can I still belong to God? Can I still be Catholic? Is there room for me in the church? Long before these conversations at all touched mainstream Catholic discourse, Luisa was already sitting with people in their fear, grief, hope, and discernment, and reminding them that they are loved by God exactly as they are. Well, I am so delighted, and thank you so much for joining me today, Sister Luisa, on the Whiplash podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, Max.
I would love it if we could start a little bit with some of your early story growing up as a young person and at the point when you started to feel the call to join religious life. I'd like to know about that background.
That's easy. I grew up in a very little town in South Louisiana. South Louisiana is very Catholic. North Louisiana is not, but South Louisiana is. My mother went to church on Sunday. My father did not, never saw him in church. But my mother only went to church on Sunday. That was her only involvement. But we had sisters in our parish. No Catholic school. I never knew Catholic schools existed. And so I got involved with them. In 6th grade, I joined the choir, and they had a youth group for the teenagers, and I was very active with that. And I had a wonderful teenage life. My teenage years were every girl's dream. So one day, the sister said to me, pulled me aside. I was a junior in high school. And she said, you have everything a girl could ever want. Have you ever thought about showing your gratitude to God and give it all back? No, I didn't know where nuns came from. But it felt like, oh, geez, maybe so. I remember thinking at age 16, I guess, I don't want to wake up one day when I'm a middle-aged woman and find out I've lived a half-baked life. I want my life to count. I want it to matter. I want to do something good with my life. So I never struggled. It just felt right. And then I entered the community with those sisters. They were a small community of missionary sisters founded in Louisiana. I entered right out of high school. They were a very progressive and liberal community. So that community, my community that I entered, they're the ones who shaped me as a person. They had shaped me as a teenager, and they shaped me as a woman. And so eventually, I entered the convent in 1961. Then fast forward to 1999, I had been vocation director for the community and had done wonderful ministries for many years and was exposed to many different people because we were missionaries. Missionaries go to where people are. They don't come. People don't come to where we are. We go where they are, on their turf. And we were Eucharistic missionaries. We weren't bringing God to the people. We were recognizing God's presence in people. So that was our posture toward the world and who we were and who people were. So in 1999, I finished my term as vocation director. And so I'm praying about, where's the fire in my belly? What comes next? Where is God calling me next? So there were 3 areas that I felt I felt some passion for. But the top one was gay lesbian ministries. I have gay and lesbian people in my family, and I've had gay and lesbian friends my whole life. And I felt that's where God's calling me. So my leadership team said, okay, that's good. That's great. But you're going to have to stay under the radar to do this ministry. Because I remember one of the leadership persons saying, we are already not the Archbishop's favorite people. So you got to be under the radar. Okay, so I didn't know any gay people in New Orleans, so I started going to PFLAG meetings. It was very early on, like the second or third meeting, at the PFLAG meeting, that this woman walked in, and everybody started clapping and hugging her. And it was like, what is this? And so I asked somebody, what? And they said, that's Courtney Sharp. She's a transgender woman, and this is her first meeting back after surgery. I didn't know diddly squat about transgender people, but I remember so well thinking, I don't know diddly squat about that, but I want to learn. I need to learn about that. So we got together. She came over to my house. She's a very gentle. Have you ever met her, Max?
I actually haven't. I haven't had the chance.
Yeah. So we remain very good friends all these years. She's very deep. She's a deep thinker, very philosophical, deeply spiritual. And her career came crashing down. She had 2 engineering degrees when she just had to transition. So she's telling me, I said, tell me, help me understand this. Tell me, talk to me. So she's telling me her story and all, and I'm resonating. I get, okay. So at some point in our conversation, first time we ever met, she leaned back in her chair and she pointed at me and she said, you get this. You get it. This is 1999. Nobody knew the word. And she said, people don't get this. And she said, for many of us, this is a profoundly spiritual journey, but we don't have spiritual people to walk with us who understand us. Well, I knew in that moment, God was not calling me to gay lesbian ministry. God was calling me to be with transgender people. That's where my call was. And it grew.
That's just, it's so beautiful. It kind of gives me goosebumps.
Me too. It gives me goosebumps too.
And I love that Courtney was part of the beginning as well of seeing the spirituality of trans people, because that's something, this idea of transition and the connection to the spiritual journey. I've heard you speak about that many times, and that deeply impacted me, because just that idea of connecting, because I was already experiencing it. And then when I heard you speak about it in those terms, I was like, yes, those are the words to capture what it really did feel like to me. Of before, I was there was some barrier, I wasn't fully able to connect to God. And through the process of transition, like in this archetypal spiritual journey, I came closer, faced challenges, yes, but then also found my way closer to God.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The biggest compliments that I have ever had in my whole life, Max, were trans people saying to me, "You put words on my own life experience." And Courtney's life it was when she absolutely hit the bottom, could not pretend to be somebody, ended up in the hospital, and said to God, "I surrender. I can't do this. I can't do this. You have to." That was the powerful, powerful grace for her. And that's what I experienced hundreds of times with trans people. And it's what you're saying. We cannot be we can't be in human relationships without pretending to be who we are not. It doesn't work. Trust and truth cannot be separated. They go together. And when we are pretending to be who we are not, a relationship won't work with another human being, and it won't work with God.
Exactly.
I just had the privilege so many times over all those years to watch people and to be a witness and give testimony to the way they came alive to themselves and to their beautiful connection with God.
So it sounds like also it was an experience, not just, personally resonating with and understanding and connecting with transgender people, but maybe also deepening your own relationship with God to see these people capable of finally coming to life in this deeply spiritual way.
Oh, Max, I have said many times that as a woman religious, I had already been a sister 34 years or so. I was 55 years old when this started. But no ministry has shaped my soul and who I am in God the way transgender people have. And that's why I always said it's been the greatest privilege of my life. It's a privilege to be a sister. Being a sister, people trust us with their soul, many people. And that is already a huge privilege, to be invited into the holy, sacred, intimate, fragile places of a person's life.
Yeah.
But to be invited into transgender people's vulnerable, broken, sacred lives in a most intimate way, and to be able to keep saying, "You are beautiful, you are precious, you are loved. And when you look at me, I want you to see God loving you. And when I see you, I see God loving me." What a privilege. What a privilege.
Yes, and that's something that was touched on in there's a beautiful profile of you that was done on the Outreach website, and I remember that's a part that really stands out to me is you speak in there about it. Some people just really need someone who represents the church in some way, like a sister, to be that face. Is that something that you have seen many times?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And it wasn't, about half the people I walked with were Catholic, or had ever been Catholic, were currently, or had ever been. About half the people I walked with had never been Catholic, but God mattered. And in whatever their faith tradition was, they were suffering from the narrative from their own faith tradition. And because they had heard so much hurtful, harmful things that come from organized religion. And so to have somebody that they felt represented the church say to them, "God loves you, you are precious." I worked right from the very beginning. the way my ministry from New Orleans got to be national was from two psychologists who were in Philadelphia. And when I went to, it was then called Habigda before it became WPATH. This is way back, 2001. That's where I met them. And so they started connecting me with their trans clients, because what they would say to me is, the therapeutic dynamic is essential with trans people, but it only goes so far. At some point, the spiritual has to be there, and that's not what we can do. That's what you, Luisa, can do for them that they as therapists can't do.
100%. And that also kind of makes me think too about how all that we've discussed so far and the spiritual journey of transition, I often find that, so, a lot of the work that I do is thinking about ways of communicating what I experience to cisgender people, to people who are not transgender, because I know that there is a hunger in a lot of people to understand, because there is such a rich spiritual life there. And also helping people to understand means that I'm equipping them when they are in conversations where maybe if trans people are being spoken about in an unkind way, then I'm giving them tools of like, well, wait a minute. I know Max, and Max has shared with me, these aspects. Like, Max is a real three-dimensional person, not just a caricature or whatever the case may be. And I know that a lot of power has come from the fact that you yourself are not trans and that you are speaking to cisgender people. But I wonder too, have you seen this sharing about the spiritual aspects and the spiritual journey of transition? Have you seen that also impact cisgender people, that specifically, like sharing with them those things too?
Most definitely, Max. I would say in my 26 years of ministry in the trans community, what has been most helpful for cisgender people is, first of all, to help them understand this is neurobiological. It's a brain thing. It's not a moral issue. It is not a moral. It's neurobiological, and it's a spiritual issue. And then to help them understand that how the process of transitioning is a sacred journey. Exactly, the process is the same as everybody experiences if we're going to become a mature adult and a holy person. The process is the same. The content is different, but the process is the same. And when I can connect, say, what in your own life, what has happened in your life that has helped give you wisdom and compassion and love? What is it? I'll tell you. I'm going to tell you every time. It's some kind of crisis. It's some kind of crisis. A death, a divorce, a friendship, the house burned down, I have cancer. It's a crisis. And so then I, from their lives, describe the process of human maturity and self-knowledge and wisdom and compassion, and how it begins life. Things are going along okay. Life is okay somehow. Then there's this crisis. So there's integration, and then disintegration. It falls apart. Whatever the crisis is, you have to rethink your life.
Yes.
It makes you see life differently. And you lose a lot in the process. No matter what the container is, you lose a lot. Then eventually, if you stay with it and not run away and not deny, then there's reintegration. Or you can call it orientation. Orientation, disorientation, reorientation. We all experience that in some way. So once cisgender people can identify with the process in their own lives, then I say, what they experience is exactly the same thing. but the content is different. And it's far, far more profound and complicated because it's not about a divorce. It's not about a house burning down. It's about who they are. And the most fundamental spiritual question for everybody is, who am I?
Yes.
So that has been profoundly helpful. The third piece that has been most helpful to cisgender people from me is to help contextualize church teaching, whether they're Catholic or some other denomination that is dogma-based.
Yeah.
To help them understand how church teaching changes. It has evolved many, many, many times. And the hierarchy, the control, the people in the control want people to believe this is how it is and it's always been this way and it's all. No, it hasn't. No, it hasn't by any means. And that process, how does doctrine develop? How does it change? And it starts with the heart of it is the integrity of the individual person's experience.
Yes.
And so the primacy of conscience, and these, by the way, primacy of conscience and development of doctrine are solid Catholic teaching. And so when families and parents say, but the church teaches that this is all wrong and we want to be faithful to the church, I say, well, the church also teaches love. You must love everybody. Do not judge. This is how doctrine develops. You have a conscience. The Catechism says you must obey your conscience. This is church teaching also. So when I explain that, it really does help people. Everything has a context. Everything has a context. And when you can broaden the context for people, then they don't feel trapped in this little lane.
Yes, especially broadening beyond just sort of in that overly dogmatic or overly doctrine driven, broadening it beyond just this preoccupation with, well, any individual action. Like I can't make any moves because I'm so afraid of any individual action. But when you're grounding it in this deeper context of the spiritual journey and the lived experience, and you're seeing the fruits as well. Like, I think that's one of the most powerful things I have experienced myself in my own transition, is to see, wow, life is different. My connection to God is more possible, is more strong than it was before, because I wasn't showing up fully as myself even before God. Just the huge impact of that.
Exactly. Precisely, Max. Yes, and my mantra to trans people for many, many years, one of my mantras was, when you are seeking to live in the truth, when it's truth you are seeking, God is with you, not against you. God is with you in the search. And the closer you get to the truth of who you are, the closer you are to God.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's, you have such a beautiful way of putting all these things, but I guess you have a lot of practice from talking to many trans people over these years.
You know, and sometimes a lot of cisgender people would say to me, well, what makes you so sure that this is really okay with God? Well, what makes you so sure about that? And what I say is, because I witness the gifts of the Holy Spirit in transgender people. I've known them. I have known many of them for a few years before they transition. I know what their life looked like before transition. I know what their life looked like during, and I know what their life looks like after. And I'm not talking about 10 or 20 or 50 people. I'm talking about a few hundred people that I know. And what I see growing and developing are the gifts of the Spirit. I see peace. I see joy. I see love. I see forgiveness in spades. Forgiveness. And forgiveness is the most profound expression of love, who is God. God is love. Forgiveness can only come from God. And the way I have seen transgender people forgive those who have harmed them so deeply, that can only come from God. That's why I'm so sure that transgender people are who they say they are, and they are moving closer to God. And what I say to transgender people over and over was, being holy has nothing to do really with going to church, saying prayers. That's not what's being holy. It's being authentic. It's living your life with integrity. That is what being holy looks like.
Mm-hmm. Because if we take seriously that God made us with intention as a unique gift to the world, then it has to be true that that authenticity is where holiness comes from, is expressing that truth of yourself. It could only make God happy.
Exactly. I say that gives praise to God. When you are true to yourself, that is what gives glory and praise to God. And it's not by accident that the word WHOLE and HOLY mean the same thing.
Exactly. And you were saying about this experience of seeing so many trans people and seeing the stages, seeing them before transition, during, and after. What you described, that is something that I wish so many people could also see, because I think in being able to see that, in being able to know trans people, they would also see those same things that you're talking about. And especially I wish that we could see more clergy and members of the hierarchy to be in that process and be in that accompaniment, because I think there's so much fear towards trans people, which a lot of it is just based on maybe just on issues, this hot button political issues type of thing, that people are missing the opportunity to actually meet and be with and be changed by a relationship. Like, for example, I am a trans person. I have had relationships with people that I know are probably not supportive of transition, for example. But I have been changed in a positive way by those relationships, as have those people. Like, there is so much power in a relationship, and I think that's also the heart of that maybe pastoral way of accompanying people as well.
Yes, exactly. What haunts me, I still remember a priest friend of mine who had many dealings with bishops who did make the effort to understand trans people. And when he was talking with some bishops about the trans people he knew, one of the bishops said, "Oh, wow. Well, I never thought about that. They have personal lives." Oh, yeah, right. They have personal lives. And when cisgender people would say, well, who want to support, and they ask me, what can I do? How can I support? I say, tell their stories. You make the effort to get to know trans people. You make the effort to know them, and then exactly what you said. Then you talk to people. Well, ask them, oh, tell me about the trans people you know personally. Do you know trans people? Well, let me tell you about the trans people I know. Because who can put up an argument about somebody's life?
Yeah.
It takes it out of the academic, theoretical, abstract, and makes it personal. And that's what it has to be.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Now might be a good time. I also kind of want to ask you, in maybe like a reflection on all of this time of ministry that you have spent. Like, I guess maybe in the beginning, probably trans people were maybe flying more under the radar. And then as time has changed, the issue of the political issue has become more, the church has addressed trans people more, but then we also had Pope Francis, who met with and supported some trans people in Rome as well. So I'm curious, like, when you look at the whole development, like, what are some of your reflections and thoughts there?
Oh, Max, it has changed very, very, very much. Yes, when I started trans ministry, the internet was new. I mean, if we can believe that, the internet was new. And now I will say, for your audience, I need to, my ministry, all these many years with hundreds of people, I have ministered mostly with adults, generally between the ages of 25 and 80. I never have done ministry with minors. So because when I started, nobody knew this. It was very, very, very trans people. So many of the trans people I walked with in the beginning were telling me what they had never said in their lives, and they believed nobody in the whole world ever felt the way they did. That's how they had lived decades of their lives, believing nobody ever felt that way. And by that point, many of them were married, had children, and that makes it way, way, way more complicated. And so their pain, their deep, deep pain, was being invisible and not seen and put in the same put in the same derogatory basket as gay and lesbian people. So they were invisible. So in the beginning, and I will say, many of the people that I walked with in the beginning, many were highly professional, doctors, attorneys, and many were just ordinary people who worked. But I never. Once I was challenged and said, why aren't you working with the street trans people? Why aren't you going down to the quarter and working with the trans women who are sex workers? And boy, I really struggled with that for a bit. But then I said, I can't keep up with the people who are already coming to me. I got to be okay. So yes, so in those early years, it was not on trans people weren't on anybody's radar. And I had to be hidden all that time, according to my community. But I knew the day will come when trans people are visible and come into the bishops' sites. And once bishops start talking about trans people, I'm not going to be able to stay hidden. So gradually, as the internet, then trans folks, that's how I learned a lot about trans people in the beginning. The internet was new. There was this, what did they call it in the beginning? A chat room, I can't remember what they called it. And I got permission to be part of it. And it was just trans people. So it was only older people who were starting to grapple with this. And the more the internet, that there's all these resources on the internet, the more famous trans people started coming out and being public. Well, then that gave some ground for younger people to come out. The more tolerant our society got. So we were making a lot of progress. Okay, so now the progress is trans people are more visible. They have resources. There are all these support groups, more conferences all over the country, more trans conferences. And then, both in politics and in the church, we take a strong right turn.
Right.
And at the same time that trans people are now more visible, which is a good thing because there's more support. So the way I see it now at this point is, there are two tracks. When people ask me, is it better now than it was then? Was it better then? And I say, it's both better now and it's worse now. It's both. It's better because trans people can have their own voice, like you and Christine and so many. You now, what I prayed for so many years is now happening. That trans people yourselves are speaking. You're not just relying on my voice. You're speaking up for yourselves. That's a good thing. But the more you speak up for yourselves, the more you get shot down and all this legislation against you. And there's no way to avoid that. You're just going to have to pass through that dying to get to some deeper life. That's what the Paschal mystery is.
Yeah. And and I'm curious. So amidst kind of all the tumultuous change, I'm just curious what it meant to you to see like the example of Pope Francis. Like such a clear, strong example of what we would like to see.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I got two things I can say about that. One is, people would say to me, "Oh, Pope Francis has met with transgender people. Now you don't have to hide. You've got Pope Francis behind you." And I would say, Pope Francis is in Rome. He's across this really big ocean. And he is not in the United States. And the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops is not on the same page as Pope Francis. So that's one thing. Secondly, yes, Pope Francis met with transgender women. And he met with the Sister Monica. Ironically, she was the real Sister Monica, and I'm the pseudonym Sister Monica here. But from Pope Francis's view, in the beginning, I think as he met more trans people, he understood better. But once the world and trans people were like, "Oh, Pope Francis, he's going to be our salvation, and he's going to be your salvation. You're not going to have to hide." I would say to them, she was ministering to them morally. Many were sex workers. They were poor. She was helping them in a traditional nun way. She's helping them be sober. She's helping them not have to be prostitutes. That's a good thing for nuns to do because they were sinners. That is not what I was doing at all. I was not fixing trans people at all. There's nothing wrong with them. I'm not there to fix them. I am there to support who they already are.
I totally see what you're saying, and it's just very interesting. Definitely in the mix of it all, like the tension you mentioned, the USCCB and how they feel versus what's being said in Rome or what's being modeled in Rome, and yeah, all the different dynamics too. It from the outside, I think people are wanting it to be a quick and easy answer. Like they wanted it to be that Pope Francis would just solve everything, or whatever the case may be. And I agree with you that the reality is definitely more complicated of these slow steps of change and having to go through the darkness as well. I do agree with you that that's just a part of what it is, because we have to face all of those negative assumptions. We have to come into the light so people can actually see us, but they're gonna react how they're gonna react, and how change always goes. But yes, I also do think something you touched on earlier really resonates with me as a very important point that doesn't get talked about enough, which is there is this idea that the church has always been the same, that it always has had this one view about everything, and that has never changed in any way. and helping people to understand that that's not the case, I think, is probably one of the the main challenges, because they combine it with this idea that trans people are a new fad, forgetting the whole history that trans people have always been here, that we have examples through many different cultures. So then it's like, well, the church is unchanging and trans people are new, therefore trans people are bad. And it's like, okay, well, you're you're missing so much in that oversimplification.
Yes. And I, when I'm talking with people, I try to give examples of how the church has changed its teaching.
Yeah.
And also, what I try to help people see is throughout the history of the church, starting right in the New Testament with Peter and Paul, there are good people wanting to do the right thing who don't agree. There have been great saints on opposite sides of whatever the hot button theological issues are. The Crusades. St. Catherine of Siena, one of my favorites, was all in for the Crusades. Yay, the Crusade. Well, she was on the wrong side of history, and she's a saint. So the Catholic Church was never this unified, we all agree, and this is what it is, and it stays like that. That's extremely naive. And when people say, well, I never heard about this trans stuff when I was growing up, and I say, we didn't hear about autism growing up. We didn't hear about chronic fatigue syndrome growing up. There are a lot of things we didn't hear about because we didn't have the science and the vocabulary. And now we do.
Mm-hmm. And to not be threatened by that as well, because I've also had experiences where people imply that, basically that we shouldn't trust the new vocabulary or the development of science. And it's like, okay, there's so many problems with that because, first of all, there are so many things that, make up our ordinary everyday lives that are the results of, discoveries and developments. And you wouldn't want us to take those things away because they're new. And then also, like, I don't know, when it comes to all the science and the science of trans people, I think it's actually very beautiful and an example of, like, an example again of God's love, to see God intentionally creating this beautiful diversity. To me, that is it's just beautiful to see that reflected,
Yes. When you look at the diversity, I say, I can't remember how many thousands of kinds of ants there are. There's a few thousand kinds of ants. If God creates a few thousand kinds of ants, you think God just creates two kinds of human beings? And I always say the Catholic Church is not anti-science. The Catholic Church is pro-science. The Catholic Church believes in evolution, and evolution is not finished. Evolution continues, and evolution moves toward complexity. Why should it surprise us that we are discovering the magnificent generosity of God's diversity and complexity in our wonderfully created humanity? Why should that scare us so much?
Mm-hmm. And then I want to ask you some forward-looking questions. So, we kind of touched on where you came from, how you started. We talked on some things that you have seen change. I'm curious, when you look forward, maybe what are some things that give you hope, or maybe what are some pathways forward what are some things that you think need to happen? Things like that, things in that category.
Max, people like you give me hope. Young trans people like you. I currently kind of correspond. I've had some Zoom conversations, and one in person who lives not far from where I am, and one who lives very far from where I am. They're in their mid-40s. Younger generations are so much more open not afraid of diversity. Embrace it and know that that's part of the reality, and are articulate, are deeply committed to what it means to live a full human life, take care of our earth, take care of each other. I see more of that in the future. And that gives me hope. There are some scary things about the future, obviously. AI, it already, we have lost some grounding for what the truth is. How do we come to some common understanding of truth? And that's going to make it infinitely harder. But we just recently, a couple of weeks ago, we had this passage in the daily readings. I think it was a daily reading. Actually, it's not past. It's coming. It's this coming Sunday, because I'm going to preach for it. That's why it's on my mind. I think it's a letter to Timothy. Always be prepared to give a reason for your hope. Mm. Mm-hmm. Be prepared to give a reason for your hope. And this is a negative kind of thing, but I say, if we don't hope, then we despair. And if we despair, we are utterly useless to God and to anyone else. We cannot despair. And hope is not the same as optimism. Those two are very different. So there is a lot to hope for. I think there's much cause for hope, but it will keep getting more complicated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. And as soon as you said that, of always be prepared to give a reason for your hope, I thought of it. I feel like I'm repeating myself here, but it is true. It's that when you said that, what immediately popped into my mind is the reason for my hope is that I know how living truly as myself has changed me and has been a powerful and positive path for my life. And I know that, and that's the thing too, is the knowing that I have about that is so deep. I know it in all the way from my fingers all the way to my toes to the top of my head. I know that and nobody could take that knowing away from me. And that knowing is what gives me hope, because, no matter what happens, I know that this is true and that this is true for other trans people as well. And so, yeah, that's where it comes from for me.
And that's why I started off by saying you, Max, you, and trans people like you and younger people your age. Living, I grew up in a generation where so many things simply were not talked about. They were just not discussed. If you entered the convent and it really wasn't for you, well, tough, you made your bed, you lay in it. If you got married and it was the wrong marriage, right, too bad. You're going to be miserable your whole life, and you're going to make everybody else miserable. That's not the world we live in anymore. We live now where it matters that our lives match our convictions and our beliefs and what we say. And yeah, so that's much cause for hope.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have covered so much, and we still have a little bit of time usually in the podcast. What direction do you think we should go next?
Well, this is a kind of a commercial. Can I do?
Yeah, do a commercial.
I really want to make people aware of the program from Fortunate Families. Christine mentioned it. And I know there are other things like that out there, but that's one resource to help people. If people who are listening to this podcast and they really don't know much about transgender people, and they're saying, well, okay, so where do I go to get to learn about them? PFLAG PFLAG is everywhere. PFLAG meetings are a good place to go, online and in person. And more PFLAG meetings are transgender focused these days. The Fortunate Families program is totally online. It's a program that I created absolutely, totally, 100% with God's grace. When I think, how did I do that? I pulled that whole thing together in 2 weeks, all by myself. Wow. How did I ever do that? It's because God wanted me to do that. But it's a good 101. Mm-hmm. It's a good starting place for people. But it is only a starting place. I encourage the cisgender people listening to this podcast. If you don't already know some transgender people, it's not hard to find transgender people because they are us. They are everywhere. And make the effort. Make the effort. You will be gifted. You will be richly gifted.
Is there anything else, any other resources or anything else you want to direct people to?
Well, okay, so full disclosure here. I have been retired now almost a year, not quite a year, and I do feel out of the loop. Because this is moving fast. The science of this is moving fast. And the political realities are moving fast. Church realities, they're getting there. I want to say, let me say this, on the record, there are some bishops who really do want to learn, and they are taking steps to meet with people who know what they're talking about so they can learn. So I do not want to totally put all bishops in one basket. That's unfair and too simplistic. Okay, but with regard to resources, generally, I think websites are better because by the time a book is published, the reality has moved past it, kind of. Yeah. So, Outreach is a good website. They try to do some trans stuff. Max, I don't know. What's your opinion of the Outreach website?
Yeah, I enjoy writing for it. I know that outreach is it's within the structure of the hierarchical church, so I see the value and I really enjoy partnering with them. But I know there are others as well, like New Ways Ministry and Dignity USA, that are not like beholden to the hierarchy in the same way, which means that they're able to more forcefully in some cases, like really uplift the honest, true reactions and responses of LGBTQ people, not just trans people, but the whole LGBTQ community. And like contrasting Outreach and Dignity, in Dignity has so often been lay-led, which I think is a very powerful and beautiful thing to see that there are people who are LGBTQ who are so passionate about their Catholic faith that they are willing to go out there and do it themselves when they need to, and they have proven that throughout history. So that's my take.
Well, and these organizations, these national organizations we're mentioning, are all Catholic. They're Catholic, but PFLAG, I think. PFLAG is really. PFLAG was one of the first. I was part of. I go way back to 1999. At that time, New Ways Ministry, Dignity, Fortunate Families were all LG. They were gay lesbian. That has always been something that bugs the hell out of me. Is the acronym LGBT? It slides off the tongue, But even still, now, a lot is LG. It's not LGBT. And so, but thankfully, in recent years, Dignity, New Ways Ministry, Fortunate Families have really gotten on board with the T part. But PFLAG is not connected to church. It's a secular, so they are certainly freer. And there's a PFLAG chapter everywhere. And there are good online resources for PFLAG. If it's not faith-based specifically that someone is looking for.
Yes, 100%. Totally agree. Well, I don't know how to thank you. I just really appreciate you. And I've always really appreciated knowing that you have existed doing this work and knowing how much, blood, sweat, and tears that you've put into it, pioneering different programs, being there for those trans people who at that time thought that they were the only trans person. That is huge, because I've heard so many stories too. I've made friends with older trans people who have told me those things, like, there were no resources. The only way I had to know anything about being trans was in the dictionary, the word transsexual. That was the only thing that existed, and I would go to the library and go to the back and look at that word, and that was the only thing that I had that I could resonate with, and I didn't see any other examples. So I think what I'm saying is I really just want to thank you for being there for all of those people that you have been there for all of those trans people, and also thank you for being here today talking with us.
It was my deepest privilege. I can never say that enough. No ministry I've ever done in my life, and I'm now 82 and a half years old, shaped me the way all of you shaped me, and it is an immense privilege. And what you are doing, Max, with this podcast series, I don't even know the right language because I'm too old-fashioned, is so wonderful, and I'm honored to be asked, so thank you.
As I finished this conversation with Luisa, I thought a lot about how rare it is to encounter someone whose spirituality is so rooted in presence, mercy, and genuine trust in God's love, in a world and so often in a church that can make trans people feel like problems to be solved. Luisa has spent decades reminding people that honesty, integrity, and self-knowledge can also be holy. I hope this conversation leaves you with some of the same hope it left me with. The reminder that God is not absent from our becoming, that the search for truth within ourselves can also be a search for God. And accompaniment, compassion, and openness to one another may still have the power to transform the church into a place that is truly loving, truthful, and fully alive.